I'm Callie with Aviation Adventures, and I recently passed my FAA written exam for my private pilot certificate with a 93%. Today I'm going to give you 7 tips on how to successfully prepare for this exam, pass it, and go into it with confidence. First tip, find a ground school that works for you. For me personally, that was one online that I could do at my own pace. Maybe for you, that's walking into a ground school where you're physically there. Me personally, I went with Pilot Institute and I loved it. I have a dedicated video to Pilot Institute. I'll link that in the description below. Be sure to check that out if you're in search of a ground school. Tip number 2, commit to that program and figure out a routine that works well for you. Don't just do a little bit here and there. Don't go into it willy-nilly. Get a routine established and follow that routine. For me personally, that was doing a little bit every single day. With Pilot Institute, it has a percentage calculator, and so I could even look at that percentage in the morning and say, okay, I want to get to 20% this afternoon or this evening. Just make sure that you don't set it aside for too long. You want to stick with it and you want to stay consistent. Tip number 3. Now I realize that everyone learns a little bit differently, but for me, something that was huge was taking notes. In fact, here are my notes from the program, and I honestly didn't start taking them until a few chapters in. This is something that really helps me to remember, and again, you may be totally different, but for me, taking notes helped me to remember the information. I could also do little drawings, and that was helpful with some of the topics. Also with this, if your instructor is explaining something and you're not quite getting it, be sure to look to other resources like YouTube and look up those topics and find someone who explains it in a way that you really understand. Make sure that you understand the topic before moving forward. Tip number 4, and this is going to kind of be specific to your ground school, but in my ground school, after each chapter, I had a practice quiz. So I would do that practice quiz, and then after each part, there were several parts throughout the course, there would be a larger practice quiz with like 20 to 40 questions on it for that part. So I would do that in my ground school. After that, I would find the corresponding part in this book here, which is not affiliated with Pilot Institute or my ground school, but I bought this book separately. I'd find the corresponding practice quiz in this book, and I would do that right after I've completed the part in my ground school. So it was a lot of repetition and a lot of seeing the questions that I was going to see in the future on the FAA exam. So I would highly recommend doing that, and it's also kind of nice to do the questions on the computer, but then to also do them in a book that you can hold in your hands. This book is the FAA Knowledge Test Exam Prep Book. It's by Gleim, and so it has over 800 questions in it, and these are the questions from the test bank that the FAA is using. So theoretically, you will see these questions again on the exam. Okay, my tip number 5 is that once you have finished the ground school, book your exam immediately. Do not wait, because all of this information is so fresh in your mind. Don't say, okay, I'm gonna give myself 2 weeks to study and then I'm gonna book my exam. Book it 2 or 3 days out, take those 2 days to study, and then get your exam done, because it's all going to be fresh in your mind. I guess tip 5 and tip 6 can kind of go together, but tip 6, take 1, 2, or 3 days to study and then take your exam. So for me, I finished my ground school on a Friday afternoon. I had to complete 2 practice exams with an 80% or above and then email the course, get that certification, and then I could schedule my exam. I scheduled the exam for Monday. So I took those 2.5 days. I did not leave the house. I did not do anything. I studied. I did 5 or 6 practice exams on the ground school. I went through this entire book again and did these practice questions. And then I also revisited any topics that maybe I wasn't remembering or I wasn't understanding clearly, and I went through and I made sure I understood them. I took notes, I did some drawings, and that really helped me understand the concepts that I maybe wasn't understanding fully. The last and final tip I have for you is to invest in a CX3 flight computer. I think these are around $125, but it's totally worth the investment, just alone in the time that you are going to save using this versus doing all of your calculations by hand. Now, I think it's really important that you understand how to do the calculations and you understand the concepts, but once you understand that, go ahead and switch over to the flight computer. It's so much easier, it saves so much time, and there are a ton of things you can do with this, and you can use this on your FAA exam. There were some things that I didn't have to memorize because I knew I'd have this going into my exam, and so that alone took a little bit of the anxiety off of me personally going into the exam, having this trusty flight computer by my side. We do have links below for all of these study materials, so be sure to check those out. Also, we have a coupon code for Pilot Institute, so if you use our link, you will get a discount on that program. To be honest with you, I was shaking when I went into my exam. I was so nervous, but I knew I was prepared for the exam itself. I will say I passed 5 of Pilot Institute's practice exams, all above 90%, so I did have that little boost of confidence going into the exam. Did I question myself during and after the exam? Absolutely. I was so nervous that I even failed it. I added up the questions that I was not sure of, and I was like, well, I think I can still pass it even if I get all these questions wrong. Turns out I got a 93%, so I knew more than I thought I did. I hope this helps. If you guys have any questions, please be sure to leave them in the comment section below. We'll get back to you. Also, please check us out on Facebook and Instagram at agaviationadventures. Thanks a lot for watching. I'm Callie.